So, in the last 2 days of Tanya, we discovered that we have not one identity, but we have actually two identities, known as the animal soul and the godly soul. Chapter 1 was the animal soul. Chapter 2, we learned about the godly soul. And we learned what their core substance is, what their DNA is. The animal soul is klipa, it's ego-centered, and the godly soul is godly. We know what they are, but we don't have any idea yet how they function, what makes them tick. We need to have a better understanding of their operating systems. And that's really what we're going to be doing today. Today's Tanya, we start chapter 3, and we are going to be analyzing the structure and the core components of the nefesh elikis, of the godly soul. So, Tanya is mostly concerned with behavior, because ultimately that's what matters the most, is the behavior, as we will see as we continue throughout Tanya. But behavior is only the last piece of a chain that begins with the whole internal process, which ultimately culminates with behavior. So before we get to behavior, which is going to be chapters down the line, we need to talk about the internal process that leads to behavior. And in this chapter, we talk about the 10 components, the 10 core components of the soul, which comprises the spiritual anatomy of the identity of the person. And of those 10 components, 3 of them are intellectual components: chachma, bina, das, commonly translated as wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, and 7 emotional components: kindness, severity, etc. However, in today's Tanya, the focus is actually on the very first 2 components mentioned earlier, chachma and bina, commonly translated as wisdom and understanding. But what is wisdom and what is understanding? I would like to suggest that rather than wisdom or understanding, perhaps a more relatable way of translating these words of chachma and bina is chachma would be awareness and maybe even intake, and bina is processing, mental processing, meaning everything begins with an intake. Everything begins with an awareness. If you're not aware of anything, if you did not take in any information, and by the way, that information can come from an outside source. You can become aware of something because you see something, someone teaches you something, or sometimes an awareness comes from a deeper part of you, the subconscious. But everything begins with a certain awareness, and that is chachma. So chachma is receptivity and awareness. And the next step is, once you become aware of something, you need to analyze it, you need to probe it, you need to mentally process it and expand it, understand it fully, reconcile it perhaps with other concepts or ideas that you know. And those are the 2 primary intellectual faculties of the soul: chachma, awareness, step number 1, bina, processing, step number 2. Where does that lead us to? Well, that's going to lead us to our emotions, and that's going to be the topic of tomorrow's Tanya.